So thank you, Ray, for joining us for our panel today on the human side of robotics. First, I want to welcome everybody. And second, I want to thank everybody for being part of Flow for the past 2 days. We're really grateful and thankful for you taking the time out of your schedule to spend it with us. And we're really looking forward to this panel. So I'm joined by 4 esteemed gentlemen who I'll let introduce themselves in a second. But again, this panel, we're going to dive into some of the questions around the humanization of robotics. What is the combination, or what is the intersection of labor, automation, all in a digital world, and obviously in a world now with COVID? So first, let's do a quick round of introductions. So let's start with you, Chad. Give us a quick intro. Who are you? Who do you work for?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Chad Clement. I work for Expeditors International. We are a Fortune 500 global 3PL provider. I run our engineering team. So we have about 400 facilities across the world, and we have engineers deployed to manage those facilities. So I help try to keep everybody in line and keep us marching in the same direction. So our engineering teams, they focus on procurement for the facilities, responding to RFPs, and then continuous improvement. So 6RS kind of falls under that continuous improvement piece of it for us. So
great. Thanks, Chad. How about you, Paul?
Yeah, Paul Giussano. I'm with Ingram, responsible for our mobility and commerce lifecycle services division. So we provide end-to-end logistical services for many top-tier technology companies and retail and e-tailers.
Fantastic. Bob?
Hi, I'm Bob Klunk. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Project Verte. We are a provider of a full circle solution for e-com technology and fulfillment.
Fantastic. And John?
I'm John Scheel, Principal for Stone Management. We're a consulting company that assesses customers' value propositions, and we really look at how that aligns with existing operating practices. So it's really a matter of looking at a business and saying what you say you're going to do, how are you actually doing that, and then finding a value within that.
Fantastic. So let's jump right into it. So obviously, well, not obviously, but we all know that today, when we see everything that's happening in the world, there is a lot of questions around labor and what is happening with labor, what is happening with labor and automation. So I want to ask each of you the same question around this. So give us a sense of, from your perspective, what is the state of the union when it comes to labor and automation, fulfillment, these aspects today? So maybe we'll start with you, Bob.
So for many years, labor was looked at as an expense and complex models for how many people you needed to do the job every day, and you managed everything around labor. Now we look at labor as a constraint. So we built our 6 Rivers module from the ground up around how people and the technology would work together. So the number one thing was culture. We wanted a place where people want to work, they feel good about what they do, their input matters, and they feel integral to what's happening. So we sequestered a team of people from all levels, all the way. We even brought some of our temporary labor in, all the way up to engineers and managers, gave them their own separate entrance to the building, and let them design this from the ground up. And the leadership I gave them was make this an efficient, fun place to work where the work just happens, and it doesn't feel like an effort. You're just working through and with. So work was designed, for example, in compartments. So every function in the module, from the receiving all the way through the outbound order, is done in small compartments that don't require an enormous amount of skill, and people can come up quickly in skill. So you can start at a pack station or a box build area and move your way up to induct or picking or put away or hospital, the more skilled position. So people come in with the technology. We extended not only the 6 Rivers, but using the 6 Rivers philosophy of easy to operate. We made everything we did in that same mold. Everything is easy to do. The box build automatically visually know how many cartons I need, because we get information from the box build, information, what orders are going into 6 Rivers. Everything's visual. It's lean. It's 5S. People really enjoy it. If something's not right, it's obvious. and everything goes down a happy path. So when you're picking, if there's anything that is not what's supposed to happen, it automatically goes to the hospital. So pickers can just pick, and I can use a more highly skilled or experienced person to troubleshoot or expedite a troubled order without jamming up the flow. Everything is looked at as a liquid, and the project was even called Confluence, our internal code name, to get a play on the word on water. So everything was thought of as a flow, and everything was built to make it a positive place for people to work.
Fantastic. Paul, how about you guys at Ingram? What is the state of the union with regards to labor?
I could tell you that's what keeps me up at night. So just labor in general, the labor market, across the U.S. is difficult. And some of it we look back to COVID, but I would tell you last year during peak, labor was a challenge as well. And I think will continue to be. If you look at the demand, so especially if you look at COVID and you look at the quicker shift to direct to consumer, more labor intensive work, companies are trying to ramp up to that. And I can tell you that, at least in my areas of responsibility, jobs are outpacing unemployment. The folks that aren't working are not people that generally work in a warehouse. And my question is, how do we attract those folks, to work in a distribution or warehouse environment? And I think some of this automation will play into that. So for us, obviously wage, and you got the big players out there that, are throwing a lot of money at it. The Amazons, the Walmarts, we're seeing it already. So, you got to be competitive, but you also have to, and I think Bob touched on it, is create a culture and create an environment where, at least for us, people want to work at Ingram, right? It's a family atmosphere. We take care of our people, we protect them, we give them opportunities to learn and grow. And just we have to be creative in how we create that environment and how we market that environment to people so that we can attract that labor. Because, even with automation, there's always going to be a labor component to it. Some of those skill sets may change as we evolve with automation. But the ability to attract and retain associates and folks is more important than ever.
That makes sense. And John, how about you and your experience, obviously in multiple, both at fulfillment, but at retail, where are you seeing the state of the union of labor today?
Well, I think I echo some sentiments that have already been expressed. Pre-pandemic, there was already a major issue with labor. A lot of players, especially in a large city like Toronto, competing for a weakening labor pool. And when I talk about a weakening labor pool, I mean that in a physical standpoint. Like if I go back to my days at Canadian Tire, a minimum lift standard was 70 pounds. In 4 years, that dropped to 30. So when you look at technology, it can actually make the job easier. Like the truck system, where you've got somebody on the floor that's picking for 8 hours that used to have to push a cart around, that used to have to do physical labor. If that component's taken away, it makes it much easier to attract people that, wouldn't be capable of doing the work in the previous environment.
Interesting. And how about you, Chad, Expeditors? How are you guys? What is the state of the union for labor for you?
Yeah, I would say it's as tough as it's ever been, if not quite a bit worse. We have thousands of contract workers across the U.S. and it's been very tough. I mean, we are on constant calls, with all of our managers across our facilities, just sharing best practices of how do we keep, retain, incentivize, people to get them in the door. And I think I'm going to echo what everybody else is saying, is just having some type of technology or something to attract them, to show them that you're different from maybe some of the other warehouses around the area. It's a big selling point. We've been trying things like attendance bonuses and just increased hourly rates and attendance bonuses based on consistently showing up, because that's another thing, is just trying to get the same people coming back day after day is not always easy too. So, and I think Paul said it earlier, just trying to work on different recruiting methods. It's been another big focus for us, is just, reaching out to people that, maybe some of the people that are working for us that they know, or family members, or, whatever we can do to get people in and keep them is definitely our main focus right now.
So that's a good sort of segue. And I want to go back to you, Paul, because you mentioned this, and Chad, you just talked about it as well. When you look at the importance of labor combined with automation, can you comment a bit more about how are you guys leveraging automation to make your work environment attractive, obviously safe, but bring in that labor, have it want to work for you guys, but also in that seasonality issue, right? Make it so that, hey, it's cool to work for England because you're using interesting technology. Can you comment a bit on that, Paul?
Yeah, I guess I'd start with we already talked a little bit about it, but just, making it attractive before we get into the seasonal piece of it is, and Bob even touched on it, right? The work, especially with Six Rivers, is intuitive. It's easy to learn. It is less labor intensive, at least in our business than it was before. So, people like that. I mean, it's interesting. We have folks that love picking, right? They could do a different job. They could do inventory. They could do quality, really sharp people. And we've got folks that come in and, the reason that they're working for us is they're getting paid and they're exercising, right? They're walking the floor and they're counting their steps and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's great. Leveraging the automation around peak, again, being, learning curve is very, very short. So, it's kind of counterintuitive, but some of the things that we have to do, with this upcoming peak is we're ramping earlier than we did in the past, just because of the challenge with getting labor. But the fact that, all of our processes with Six Rivers from picking to pack out, or just learning curves are very short. So, in another environment, that reduces, we can ramp a little bit later. Hopefully we'll get back to that where, we don't have that challenge around stranded labor, too many folks in the building when we don't have the work for them. Mm-hmm. But I can tell you that, we're 2 years into Six Rivers, like we have a pretty stable core staff. And our turnover in Ingram Associates is minimal, but it was much higher before we went with Six Rivers, just because of the physical nature of the work.
Interesting. So it's really that ability to leverage the automation coupled with labor to make it an attractive environment. And Bob, you sort of kicked us off by talking a lot about some of that processes and in terms of some of the sort of breaking down the segments of what you guys are doing. How are you guys leveraging technology and automation with your labor to meet your fulfillment or your customers' needs? I mean, you mentioned some of it, but can you comment a bit more about that, again, with also in light with that notion of making it an attractive place to work?
So culture is the number one thing, and culture comes with good leadership. So one of the examples is retention is one of the performance measures for the leadership in my fulfillment centers. So we use staffing agencies, much like any of my counterparts here do, but we look at every person that comes in the building as a potential long-term employee that we'd like to keep. So there's a seasonal nature, right? And that's up and down, and people know that. But we evaluate people as soon as they come in. Are they part of the culture that we want to be around? Because we have a very positive culture here. And it's like putting a saltwater fish into a freshwater aquarium. It's not going to work. So we want to find out quickly if someone's not going to fit into the culture here. And, the old phrase DNR, right? We want that person gone with dignity and respect quickly. And we want to get people in here who want to be part of this fun, exciting culture. And with that we don't allow people just to hit the floor. So it's a very short train up, right, to use these processes. And and I'll repeat, we use the same Six Rivers sort of philosophy that it's intuitive and easy to work. The Six Rivers onboarding team was fabulous in helping us extend those processes to the non-technology functions as well. And that everything is intuitive and people feel valued and they make a difference right away. And they are given a partner to train up, and they're given formal training in writing, then on the floor, and they're not just turned loose like the old days of warehousing. Is just go follow Johnny around and he'll show you what to do, right? People are trained so they understand what's expected of them. And then we make it fun, right? Yes, you have to hit your standards, right? So, my everything has to work. My printers have to print, right? My tapers have to tape. And the people doing the work, they have to hit their standard, but it's not a huge effort to hit the standard. If you're doing the process, you will hit your numbers, and we don't beat people up over standards. And I will tell you that works better than the whip of beating people up over not hitting numbers. If someone's not hitting their numbers, there is a reason for it. They've not been trained properly. They don't understand expectations. Maybe they just can't do that particular job. So find them something they can do. And when you work with people, other people see that as well, that you're working to make everyone successful. And you're going to find them a place where they can work. And this sort of technology just really, really helps with that, because somewhere in the different compartments of a Six Rivers operation, you can find something that anybody can do.
No, that's really interesting. So we take what Bob just said, and Chad, I want to turn to you, because I know from the Expeditors point of view, you guys are obviously having to do the same, where you're trying to encourage the proper behavior. Can you shed some light on how you guys are going about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe let me share, the type of accounts that we use Six River on. Obviously, being a 3PL, we have multiple clients in one facility. So we really try to target Six River for our clients that have a large SKU base, not a lot of volume per SKU. There's a lot of walking, obviously. So that's who we're putting, Six River on, those type of accounts. Now, before, we had Six River on these accounts, it was hard to develop common metrics, because you might have orders where there's, a lot of, picker might have a lot of one SKU, and then, they're not having to walk very far and they have a really high pick rate. And then you got another picker that's got SKUs all over the place and they have a lot of travel. And so trying to drive towards a common metric just, and pay them for performance just didn't work. It wasn't fair, So now flash forward, we have Six River on those accounts, and, the algorithm is putting the same orders that have the same SKUs on the same chuck. And it's decreasing our pick density, or we're able to pick a lot tighter now. And it's equalizing, I would say, the amount of walking that our associates are having to do. And so we haven't necessarily gone to pay for performance yet, but we're definitely getting a much more common metric among our pickers. So it's just been nice to be able to see that. And those people that are our high performers, they're still, I would say, visually being rewarded, because people are able to see how they're performing, and I think the pickers feel that it's a much more fair environment now, where it's not like, hey, he got all the close picks and I got all the long picks. It's, it wasn't fair. So I think there's just, I think the pickers are enjoying it a lot more. So I would say that's how they're kind of, rewarded, is just feeling like they're in a much more fair environment.
No, absolutely. I think that's it. So let's pivot a little bit. And this one, let's start with you, John. This is, we just talked a lot about how we incentivize labor, how we use automation to make sure that across the board, they're able to do their jobs. But obviously we're approaching peak, and it's going to be a very interesting peak, obviously, because of what's happening. John, from your experience, what are folks, whether it's from the fulfillment side or the retail side, how do they view labor in this time of peak? And also, how do they view sort of the combination of labor and automation to address the needs of peak?
Well, peak is clearly the biggest challenge that anybody faces. And I think that, the real question is, how do you get an untrained workforce up to speed in the shortest period of time? And that had always been a challenge, because, people have referred to the weeding out process. So if you're going to train somebody for 3 days, you get them on the floor, and then you have, issues with them after the fact, that's time you have to recover, and you simply don't have that in peak. So I think, to me, it's always been, how can you cut the learning curve while protecting the quality? That's the paramount. That's what you really need to do. And we found that with our adaptation of Six Rivers technology, we were able to cut our ramp up time from literally 3 days to 15 minutes. So it's not the be all to end all solution, but it's massive. It's massively helpful for doing an immense amount of work in a short period of time.
Interesting. And Paul, can you comment on that too? Because obviously you guys, well, all of us deal with peak, but in particular, I know we've had some conversations where that's a big challenge. So building on what John was saying, how are you guys approaching peak when it comes to the labor automation equation?
We've learned a lot, right, with Six Rivers over the past 2 years. We had our first peak last year. So, the labor is the one piece of it, but for us in automation it's learning, right? It's understanding the capabilities of automation and Six Rivers, and utilizing the tools that Six Rivers brings to the table, and learning how to do that and how to optimize the systems. You take a team that's going through, that did a very manual process, and you introduce this, it's difficult. I've done a lot of automation integrations in my career, and change is difficult. And I think it's about learning, right? It's understanding how our performance, the KPIs, and how do we address those opportunities by leveraging automation and lessening our dependence on labor through those periods of time. So for us, it's learning. It's immediately when we came out of last peak, it was right to what can we do better? We've been working on peak, quite frankly, all year long.
So it's a 365 project is what you're telling us.
No, it really is. And I think the partnership with Six Rivers has been great, because a lot of the learnings that came out, I think, are opportunities for Six Rivers and probably a lot of your customers, in enhancements and things that we can improve on from an automation standpoint and a robotics standpoint, that'll streamline efficiencies, I think, for everybody.
Great. So I'm gonna put you on the spot right now, because I think there's a great question that came from the audience, and I think you mentioned it earlier about the notion of ramping up your employees, getting them up to speed, right? Not just throwing them out there onto the floor. Can you comment a little bit about sort of the time frame it took from the decision to deploy and then to full rate?
From the day of deployment?
Yes.
To full rate, I think from a group perspective, it was fairly quick. I would say, it's very intuitive. In our environment, we utilize Six Rivers in an apparel business, apparel retailer that we support. High SKU count, slow moving. Our storage was probably the biggest challenge, because we actually utilize retractable bins, and I think the truck piece of it is very easy getting to rate, but the ability to understand what location you're supposed to be at is probably the biggest difference. So we use speed cells. So basically, you have high density, many facings in a bay, and they could be the first row, they could be the second row, or the third row. That was our biggest challenge. But in terms of people learning how to pick process, it was very quick. And then I think, dealing with all those other aspects of the business drove more and more improvement. But the chuck process and pack out process was very simple.
Bob, when we take some of that measurement aspect, right, how do you guys measure, sort of the success with marrying the labor and the automation for you guys?
Sure. So in the end, you're still measuring units per hour. It's as they say, it's not about the money. It's about the money. So in the end, right, you have to run a profitable operation, right? You have to hit your budgets. You have to hit the numbers. So after all the rainbows and butterfly conversations are over, right, you still have to hit your numbers. So people still have to hit rates, and we do offer incentives, and we do measure, and so it's about hitting your rate and a sustained rate, right? We want a consistent, sustained rate. So we still use the same old-fashioned metrics like units per hour and pack stations, and the best way to hit your numbers is to be working all the time. So it's all about flow. So the name of this show, right? Absolutely everything is looked about is the water always running. So if you have packers with nothing to pack, it doesn't matter how fast they pack when they're packing, when they're not packing. So the number one thing to monitor is are all the parts moving, right? There can't be anything stopped, any blockers, anything that keeps you from moving. Another challenge, and I want to add on to what Paul said there, when you're ramping up, the challenge is having enough work to give people sustained work as you add those people. So as you're building up for peak or a promotion or anything, you have to constrain the work. So let's say you're going to go from 300 to 1,000 people in a picking operation. Well, when you start ramping those people up, you have to hire them in advance or they won't be there, right? So no matter how fast you're able to train them, that you have to have the person, right? So you're going to have to hire that person before somebody else hires them. And when they get there, you got to have work for them to do. You have to have something for them to do, or they'll get bored and leave. So then you have to take the work that you have and meter it out, because the mistake most people make is they have extra people, so they just get done earlier. And then they have everybody throwing snowballs, in the afternoon. So what you have to do is rotate people through. So you have to model or simulate peak, and you have to say, I'm going to run a sustained X number of units per hour for the first 2 hours of this shift, and we're going to practice like it's peak. And then we then after in the afternoon we run out of brooms to lean on. So we have to find other things for people to do. I have gone so far as to rent chairs from a wedding services provider and a screen and play movies for people to watch, because I have to have the people and they can't just wander around and get into mischief. So it's some different sorts of measures you have to look. So like retention is my number one metric, right? Am I hiring good people? Am I keeping good people? And the best way to retain people is to hire good people and to have good trained leadership. And the secret word is engagement. Engaging with your people, your supervisors, your leads. They know their people. They work with them every day. It's a positive environment. If I lose somebody for absenteeism, it's a leadership failure. Why was that person missing work? What was the problem? Why couldn't they get to work? They didn't have a car. What could we do to help these people? If we got someone that wants to work, we will find a way to make it work for them. So there's a few additional measures like retention and the instantaneous sprints of work. And then downtime is that's okay, right? If you did the work in 2 hours on plan and there's 2 hours of non-profitable work, well, that's going to have to be the plan in the future, because I can't not have the people. The same way I can't order 6 Rivers robots the day before I need them, right? And those robots are going to sit idle for the same amount of time, but nobody thinks about that. But you have some extra people sitting in your warehouse without doing some work, everybody loses their mind. So you've got to look at it a little bit differently like that, because the system all has to work together.
So that's interesting. So you pulled on an interesting topic, which is obviously not just retracting labor, right, but the retention aspect.
Yep.
So Kat, maybe I can ask you this question following on that. How are you guys, or what do you guys do for best practices when it comes to labor with regards to retention?
Yeah. Probably the biggest thing that we're doing to try to retain a lot of these people is just providing them, like Bob was saying, an engaging environment. If they're working down the street and they're pushing a big cart and doing picking that way, or if they come to our house and they're playing a video game, behind a robot, it's just they're naturally gonna want to stay in that environment. a lot of the people that we have doing picking, they tend to be, you know, a younger generation. And so that's kind of the environment that they've been raised in, is playing video games and playing on screens. And they like to compete, they like to compete against each other. So, being able to show them that and show them how they're performing and how they're performing against their friend or whoever it is, I think that just helps get them back in the door every day, and keep them engaged. So like Bob said, it's all about engagement, keeping them interested, and then just keeping them, safe too. I think that's a big thing that we're trying to do, is just make people feel safe. They just got so many things that are pulling at them right now, whether it's childcare issues or, just health concerns in general. So I think trying to keep them safe, Six Rivers really had a big impact for us on that. Like I said, in our prior life, we used to push carts around, and we would have a lot of congestion, because the orders were distributed among all the different carts, right? And everybody had this specific SKU on their cart. And so the carts would congregate, into a certain area. And then, that obviously in today's environment, that wouldn't work with our social distancing. So now all those orders are assigned to one truck, which is nice. So it's all in one picker, and now our pickers are spread out. So I think those are the things, make people feel safe, keeping them engaged, keeping them in a fun environment. Just, it helps with that a lot.
Yeah, and appeal to like my 13-year-old kid, right? Put a screen in front of them, they'll do anything. So I think that's absolutely spot on. We're just talking about technology. So John, I want to ask you this question. We're talking about obviously robotics and coupled with labor and the importance of all that. But when we think about this, right, and for our audience, technology isn't always seamless in terms of adoption, right? It's not just, hey, let's just take this off the shelf and this, and we're just going to use it. I know you have a lot of experience. Can you comment a bit about the acquisition and the adoption, or how you need to proceed when it comes to making these decisions around technology?
Well, I think the key thing is the ability to like slowly integrate into existing processes. Like if we go back to our first setup that we had with the trucks, we actually looked at them and said, we're going to introduce them 1, 2, 3 at a time into an existing process. And what we actually did by doing that is we actually demonstrated to other associates in the building that the trucks were a friend, not a foe. Because you're always going to have that. People are always going to look at it and say, well, you're automating, and automation equals end of my job. And I think by doing that and by gradually demonstrating and having people have dialogue like, wow, I was on a truck today, fantastic, compared to pushing a cart, it makes it that much easier. I think more from a business standpoint, the key thing is making sure the workflow feeds the machine to eliminate downtime. And I think one of my original call outs when we first got the trucks was that they had like an 8-hour charging cycle. So they'd run for 8 hours and they'd have to stop and charge. You guys immediately addressed that, so we could actually keep the workflow going, because everything I gained by using them, I was losing in the second production shift. So it's really, really a matter of looking at it and saying, can you keep the trucks working? Can you keep the people working? And if you have that and you really focus on eliminating downtime, it's a very easy thing to sell, financially to the organization and to the employees working for you.
So it's really sort of a top-down view of being able to sell the automation, but demonstrate to the people that are going to be using it why it's important. But also, like you said, sort of going through that process of making sure that it's not just hey, we're telling you we're going to drop it in and off you go and you run with it.
And the other nice thing too is if you look at the side benefits, like we had operations where we had extensive people doing quality checks on packaging, number of other things, and that's the massive side benefit of the truck, is that can eliminate that whole entire cost line, because the truck is checking quality at time of pick. So there are a lot of other things that you can even sell, especially in a 3PL environment, that you can sell to your clients. Like, look, we just dropped this huge amount of cost. We don't need to double check anymore. And we found we were at 99.8% order accuracy with a person that had been trained for a couple of days. So it was a really, really good fringe benefit.
So let me pull on a thread that I think, Chad, you brought up. I'm going to ask you, Bob, about this, which is around leveraging the automation in today's environment with regards to safety, right? And how is automation playing a role, sort of an ancillary role, right? Obviously, automation is going to help your labor do their job and their function. And you talked about retention, but can you comment a bit about how are you leveraging automation when it comes to the safety aspect of labor today?
So that's I hadn't anticipated that topic, but it's a good one. So there is less heavy equipment moving in around the pick areas. So the areas where people and trucks live are completely separate from any heavy equipment. So you don't have, walkie riders or forklifts or dog trucks in the same area any longer. We designed this specifically to be the best in class combination built for this type of picking. So everything is fed from the back or with chuck carts for put away. So there's never a time when a human and a machine occupy the same square feet. So it's reduced the number of things, and even things like pallet jacks. Even pallet jacks are dangerous. You can drag one over your heel. It's just bad things can happen anytime you're moving something heavy. So less moving things. So there's the strains and pulls and trip hazards associated with things. And then there's the really dangerous parts of warehousing. When you're driving a 20,000 pound forklift, bad things can happen. So there's just less instance of that. So just statistically, fewer times when heavy things and people are in the same place with energy, it's greatly reduced. And then several of my counterparts here have mentioned just not dragging a cart, right? It's hard work. And so there's just, back, neck, ankle, wrists, all sorts of, seemingly minor injuries, but you wear everybody down, right? It just wears them out.
Right.
Where the chuck picking is more like exercising, right? When you exercise, you feel good because exercising isn't something that injures you. But when you're moving heavy things that's not natural for you, your body isn't made for that. You're more prone to get injured. So from the high rate, low injury numbers, just sprains and trips versus the traumatic injuries, both are impacted by really the layout, but the technology enables it.
Yeah, I don't know, Bob. I try to tell myself I don't get injured exercising, but it happens all the time to me. But that might be my issue. Paul, can you comment a little bit about now from what's happening today with COVID? Are you seeing automation being leveraged to keep people socially distant, things of that nature?
Yes and no. I would tell you that at least with Six Rivers, the work is where it's at in the building, right? So you're going to have proximity. I mean, if you look at CDC guidelines, and I think it's 15 minutes now that they say, within six feet is an issue. Obviously, with the trucks, that's not a concern. Our biggest challenge is in at least that apparel business is like our pack out areas where we have people that are, within 6 feet. So we've done some things to address that. So plexiglass partitions and face shields and things like that to keep people able to do that. We have other parts of our business where we do production, where we actually kit and add components to retail kits where you have production lines and you have people that are very close together and doing things like that and be creative about it, allowing you to get that output that you need to service your customer, and doing the right things for your associates. Going back to being safe, right? It's just doing all those right things, making sure that your people feel safe in that environment. And I think, just the nature of Chuck and the processes lend itself to meet, those standards we want to keep for associates in terms of safety. It really has not been a challenge.
Great. We mentioned a little bit about gamification. So Chad, maybe I'll turn to you on this one, because I think you talked about it a little, you brought it up. How do you view gamification when it comes to incentivizing, measuring, motivating your labor?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I was saying earlier, I think we're just starting to get there to where we can have a common metric that we can incentivize people. I think we're just we know it's a, we've done it in a lot of other processes. We haven't done it with robots yet. So I think that's kind of the next step that we're looking at. We know that we need to tread lightly before we do that. But, it's, in all honesty, on some of the accounts that we've deployed Six River on, like I actually went out and picked in the previous process, spent, several hours doing it in the previous process and spent several hours doing it with Six River. And I just couldn't, I wasn't raised, working in a warehouse. And so I just could not believe the difference of how much more of an engaging, there's that word again, environment it was, and just how much more it kept me, focused on the task and focused on the job. When you're just, watching a piece of paper, watching a scanner, it's pretty easy to get off task and, keeping the person engaged in what they're doing and getting them to the next step and, keeping the flow and getting them to the next steps. It's kind of what the Chucks do really well. So, just from a personal standpoint and also watching our employees, you feel like there's a lot more flow in the operation and things just move. And I think the gamification really draws them in to keep them, engaged. So.
Fantastic. John, from your perspective too, same question around gamification, right? What have you seen in your experience? Like how do you see this evolving moving forward in the world of fulfillment, but also potentially in the world of retail or other aspects of supply chain?
I think like anything else, you have to be mindful of the fact that we're dealing with a younger generation of people coming into business. And, for people that have been around for a while, growing up with a green screen doesn't really seem to be, particularly troublesome or offensive. But when you look at, how the younger generation adapts to technology, having a link to gamification, just from a teaching perspective, is absolutely monumental because it's something that they're familiar with. It's like, can I pick up my phone? Why do I need this, RF device? It's just to a point where I think it's maybe a matter of the older generation catching up and realizing that things can be, a lot simpler than they currently are. So I think we're probably, as senior citizens, are probably the roadblock more than anything else.
No, I think you're right. All right, guys, we've got a few minutes left. This is my favorite part. I'm going to ask each one of you, and I've prepped you for this, so I hope you have some great answers. And we'll start with Bob. Project out 5 years, right? What is happening in 5 years in the world of fulfillment, in the world of labor and supply chain, or whatever you want to look at? But what's happening that we are not thinking of today that you think is going to impact how we do fulfillment, how we deal with labor, automation? So start with you, Bob.
All right. So I think there are going to be fewer massive distribution centers. I think there will be a much denser network of smaller in-market fulfillment centers that could take all sorts of forms. And why I'm so interested in this technology is this is so easy to deploy that if you have anything with a flat floor and a roof, it can be made into a fulfillment center very quickly. And I think the massive, old school efficiencies of unit sorters and gigantic Death Star operations are going to be less and less. And I think there's going to be more in-market fulfillment, and they'll still have their place. I mean, the big super hubs as feeders to the in-market, but I think it's going to be a decentralized frenemy network of fulfillment.
A frenemy network. I love that. Paul, How about you?
Yeah, I agree with what Bob is saying. I think, if I look back, at the last 5 years, just the pace of moving towards automation again, as the world goes e-com and the need to, next day delivery and those type of things. So I agree with the decentralization, right? We want to be close to our customers. They want same day, next day delivery. But what I see is an increased demand from companies to rush to automation, right? To get in the game. And you've got integrators, you're gonna see an influx of new companies coming in and new technologies and things like that. We're looking at a lot of really cool stuff right now. And we look, that we want to deploy in the next 2 to 5 years, but much of it is unproven. right? And, you know, who wants to be the guinea pig with this new technology? So I'm hoping some of the things that we're seeing today are going to get battle tested, so that, you know, if you decide to enter into that, right, that you've got a proven system that's easy to integrate. And then the other thing I would say is, I think, you know, and we're seeing it even today, is more modular, right? Kind of bolt on, build upon sets of automation where you can start in an area, and as you progress or as business grows, you could add on to that, you know, starting in one area and then becoming end-to-end automation fulfillment.
Awesome. John?
Well, I mean, I have my perspective on this is I hope the world slows down a little bit. And the reason I say that is I've been in numerous situations where businesses is focused upon accuracy and timeliness, and what that means to the overall supply chain. If you're focusing on not just getting product to a customer, but focusing on getting the customer what they want when they need, actually can drive huge costs out of the supply chain and can make the overall business more sustainable and accurate. So I'm just a little bit concerned right now, the number of boxes going out the door. I mean, you know, the other day I had an order from actually one of my own former distribution companies. I know the business, and I got 3 boxes from the same distribution center. And I just go back and I question, are we really focusing on the right thing? Should we not be focusing on, you know, a complete experience within a timeline that I expect, rather than just, you know, rushing after what we assume? I think we just ask the question and let the customer decide.
No, I love it. All right, Chad, you got the last word on this one.
Okay. Yeah, I think there's a hyper focus right now just on basically from the time the order drops till it's in your door. And, you know, I think that's going to continue. There's no doubt about that. But I think as that gets flushed out, I think we're going to start to see people step back a little bit and start to focus on their overall supply chain. So I think there's going to be a lot more focus on from manufacturer to brokerage to getting it in the door. Because, you know, I'm just looking at the inventory that we're carrying for a lot of our clients, and it's just, you know, I think they're ignoring that back into, or I should say the front end of the supply chain right now, because they're so focused on just trying to get it into somebody's house. So I think in time we're going to see that step back. And I think the other thing that we're going to probably see is I think the pendulum has swung so hard towards e-commerce right now. I just know from my own family experience, I think once things settle down and we're able to get back out in the environment, I think you're going to start to see people go back out and want to shop and to try things on and do those type of things again. So I can see a mix now where we have these, like Bob was saying, basically we have these strategic locations that are more closer to people, but I think they're going to be probably in the malls. You know, so I can see DCs being built into the malls where now you're going into the mall to do shopping, and you're not actually going into a store, you're going into more of like a display center. And then, you know, you're picking out your items, and then the DC in the back is fulfilling it all for you. So you can shop at all your different stores and you get one order, you know, as you leave the mall, or maybe you go there and pick up your order. So I think those are some of the things that we're going to see here in the near future.
Guys, fantastic. I know we ran over, so I apologize, but really great stuff. So I want to thank Chad, Paul, Bob, and John. You guys were fantastic. It was a really great session. I want to thank everybody for listening and participating. This has been Flow 2020, the human side of robotics. Please go over now. I know Chris Lingerfelter has some closing statements, but again, thank you everybody. And thanks guys for being on this panel. It was really insightful and really good stuff. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
you.